Tim, I'm really happy to be back from hiatus. It is very exciting. We're now in early February 2024. Hello to everyone out there. Thank you for your messages and your concern. We are absolutely coming back and we're here. Tim, welcome.
Hey, I'm so happy to be back, mainly because not only is this sort of fun to kind of do because we've been friends for so long, because I just love having these free therapy sessions with you. It's great. So I'm ready to open myself up and get told how to fix it.
Nice, nice. Well, I do like to tell people what to do, so it's all good. What I've noticed though, delegating.
Delegation.
I sadly, this is kind of the way it's shaken out. Some people are good at doing and some people are good at coaching. And I think we know where I fall in that hierarchy. So I have not made significant progress on my book because I got distracted by doing something that was more fun, which was making like 20 something videos for my board game. And so if anyone's interested, you can Google Breakaway Football and you'll see us out at Uplink Underground Games. Quick plug. But yeah, I had a whole backlog of videos that I wanted to create. So I did that. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. That way I don't have to write. Yay. Okay, I'll just keep doing this. So I've been kind of morphing back to it, but the Super Bowl is coming up and I always make the two teams that are competing in the Super Bowl. And then we do we call a pre-enactment, not a reenactment, but a pre-enactment of the Super Bowl a week ahead of time. And so that's coming up this weekend. And then after that, I'll be able to put it all aside and then move on and actually write.
Do you how do you really feel about the novel that you were working on and putting it aside? Is it something that you're sort of like, look, I'm legitimately making something else? Because you're creating and that's what's bringing you joy. And isn't that kind of what's important?
Maybe? It is. No, it is. Yeah. And I am still thinking about it and actually discovering, the real direction. I had written myself into a corner and gotten to a point where I had a bunch of scenes kind of mapped out, but I didn't really want to write them. And I interpret that from my own work as you're going down a path that many people have gone down and you don't find it interesting. So if you don't find it interesting, chances are the reader won't either. So maybe that's not the path you should take. And I struggle with it because I think, all right, well, I know stories that work. We'll put that in quotes. These stories work. And if I just sort of reskin a story that works, then my story will work. Yay. But it's so unsatisfying because when you can see, the ghost of the thing that you ripped off in your work, that's not satisfying at all. I want the things that I write to be very, singular. I don't want them to be based on other things. And if it turns out that I don't have enough skill to pull that off, or if I'm setting an unreasonable goal, well then tough. I mean, I don't want to write a reskinned version of the Hunger Games, but right. I'm sure that exists out there and I'll bet it's been published and I'll bet it's sold a bunch of copies, but that's not my goal. My goal is to write something that I'm super proud of that I don't recognize in other published works. And like I said, if I'm not good enough to do that, then that might be the reality. But that's the goal. I'm not going to shortchange or cheapen my goals in order to just sort of accomplish, a basic but minimal output. I want to do what I want to do. But yeah, I mean, the theme is really starting to crystallize for me. And this is a theme that's been done over and over, but the banality of evil. What I find is that, and I can't tell you too much because I don't want to ruin the twist, but the thrust of the characters that are making decisions, everyone except for the main character, is really making decisions from a point of view of self-serving. What is best for me? And that's not always true in fiction, but in this particular narrative, it's absolutely true. Everyone is doing what is best for them. And I think at the beginning of the book, so is the main character. But as they pivot and start to look at different ways to make decisions, it sort of should showcase or highlight the fact that these people who are making these decisions and having these terrible results come about, it's not that they intend to be evil. they're making decisions that are good for them. Other people are suffering as a result, and they're like not even recognizing it sometimes. Like it's just not this, mustache twirling villain in the corner. It's not. It's just people not caring about each other, and it feels evil. So I'm really excited to get back into it and explore that, because I do think that is something that happens a lot in the real world, is that where we might see intent, there's just an absence of care, and that might appear to be intent by the person who is suffering, but the person who created the suffering may not even be aware of the suffering at all.
Yeah. So you're obviously like, you're into the world. You're in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I haven't just sort of said, that was fun and walk away into the sunset. No, I'm still very much intending to do it, but I can't say that I'm writing. I cannot say that, I'm making notes and I'm working on the structure. It's like, no, dude, you took a break to go do something else, but it's still there. It's like the echo. You can still hear it every day. I can still hear it. So I am excited to get back to it. And I think that'll happen in February, but I just, every time I put a due date on this thing, it comes and goes. And even the act of putting a due date on it sometimes makes me put it off. It's like, I don't have to do that until the 5th. It's like, oh man, really? Like you're giving yourself a deadline and then creating an institutional excuse to skip the deadline. Like, what are we doing here, man? Like either you want to write or you don't. Like just figure it out. So, yeah.
There's everything that you just said. There's so many things. I'm going to forget everything that I wanted to say about what you just talked about, because there's so many little details that evoke so much emotion in me. Number one, one of my biggest problems that I had for the longest time was the deadline and putting the deadline on myself, because for me, I know that there are people that works for, but I was like, nope, I need to do this thing by this date, would just make me hate it and make it feel like work. And it was so difficult to do, personally, when it's sort of like, okay, I mean, and I'm not talking about like, I need to have this done by next Friday. I'm like, I'd like to have this done by the age 25, and I put so much shit on myself over the years since college of like, there was so much pressure that I put on myself to have something that put me in that, that top 20 under 20 list, or the top 30 under 30 list, or the top 40. And so I was like, I need to do something. And that made it really, really difficult. And then, I think earlier you had touched upon the fact that you didn't want to see the ghost of other people's work in your work. And it's funny because I do like that a little bit, but I'm sort of running parallel to your thought. This isn't exactly what you said, but I love sort of being able to show people the stuff that I loved that fueled my own work. And I think, maybe the easiest way to say that is putting some Easter eggs in it or something. Or what I've done with the Mal Noir book that I wrote is like all of these movies, these noir films that I've loved. Like last night I got really excited because I saw a 1947 film called Lured. Criterion seems to know me. Every month they have a new collection of noir films, and this one was Gothic noir. It starred the one, the only, the amazing, the talented, the gorgeous, the funny, the just another spectacular level of human being, Lucille Ball. And and it was a really, really great, and I was like, wow. And it had that inspiration that made me like, oh, you know what? I want to get back to it. What if I put a little detail like that? And that's what's kind of happening to me. One of the excuses that I end up making and not returning to works. David Lynch once said something, and I'm super paraphrasing because I can't find the meme right now, is that, yeah, of course, everything under the sun has been said, but it's never been said in your voice before. And that's something that I'm really trying to latch onto, is this idea that like, I've got nothing new that I'm going to be writing about. There's nothing. I'm never going to give the insights. I'm no Plato. I'm no Aristotle. I'm no Frederick Douglass. I'm no whatever, trying to just give insight into the human condition. But I can at least try and have it from my warped, stupid perspective, that I've garnered over the past 50 years. which, you know, might
Yeah.
not be that great, but it's
Well,
still something that I feel. And that's the problem too, is tuning into that. There's Rick Rubin recently said, you know, the audience should come last. And that's one of his philosophies on working with musicians, is that the audience should come last. And I take that to mean I should be writing the way, trying to listen to the voice and making the choices that I want to make that keep me interested in what I'm writing. And man, oh man, oh man, that is so difficult for me. So difficult.
I tell you
Because,
that whole
yeah.
thing that Rick Rubin, that's very interesting. And by the way, I don't know who had on their bingo card, that there would be a Rick Rubin reference in the first 15 minutes of the podcast, but, you win. But that is interesting because, boy, if you ignore the audience, or if the audience comes last, then, man, you run the risk of not having any audience at all. However, I agree, because if you're an artist and you're trying to create art, then the creation of the art is the goal, and the appreciation of the art is almost a side effect. So that is provoking some thought for me. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very, because and it's helpful for me because I think we've documented very well. Maybe we haven't really. You and I have personally talked about it, about how much I want to be in certain literary magazines because I have this sort of like, grade me, please validate me. I want to be part of the cool club, or what I perceive as the cool club. And I think that instead of taking the writing that I read in those pieces and sort of, it's almost like, you know, feeding an AI. You're trying to take in as much information. You're reading a lot of stories. You're reading a lot of writers, and you're finding the stuff that you like and saying, oh, that's a really interesting way that they did this, X, Y, Z, ABC. And how can I incorporate that into my own writing? Oh, I like the choice they made here. I never would have thought of that. How would I handle a choice like that? And so for me, I've always, for, you know, this past maybe 2 years, I've been writing for certain audiences. I've been writing for these lit mags to be like, look at me. I could be, I could do something cool like that. I could do something cool like that. And the past, actually kind of during the hiatus since the end of season 2, when I wasn't writing, when we weren't working on novels, and I sort of went back into the short fiction, I was just sort of like, you know what? I need to listen to some of the other advice that I've seen on Twitter or social media that's sort of like, don't go by submission dates. Whenever your piece is finished is when it's finished. Then you find where it goes to. Me, I'm like, oh, this thing has a submission for, I don't know, what's the theme? Trees, and how we, you know, love to climb them and build forts. Okay, I'm going to write something for that. And then I just chase after them instead of what I've been doing for the only a couple weeks now, trying to remind myself, audience comes last. Stop writing for other people who might not ever read this. Write it the way that you want it, trying to make it the way that you feel your voice is being, you know, clarified and crystallized on paper, and then find a place for it.
Yeah.
And it's been a weird change.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's be real though. You have published quite a bit in the last year, especially in the short fiction space. And it's because you're chasing, availability. So like if the goal is I want to get as much of my work out there as possible, then I think you approached it the right way. Let me look for opportunities. And if I need to create something specific for this opportunity, I'm willing to do that work. So I think, you know, the work that you did and that exercise, that kind of steeplechase is commendable. But now you've had a change of heart. And I think that is also commendable, because if you're working on something longer, something that is, it requires a level of stamina to even finish it, first of all, and you kind of have to love it. And then I think you'll grow to hate it, but then at the end, you'll still love it, love that it's done for sure. But you know, you won't be able to chase these kind of artificial, audiences or themes in the longer work. So I like that you've pivoted away from that, chasing opportunity, and are really focusing in on the revision, of your Madeline Tin novel.
Yeah. And, I told you a couple nights ago, I texted, you know, I have such fear of going back to this first draft. every single thing on the planet, everyone in the world is like, forget your first draft. Just get it all out on paper. Don't worry about it. Just explore, just write, just overwrite, just underwrite. Make it as nasty, but just get it done. You're going to get back to it. And as we've talked about before, this is like the 5th time I've written a 50,000 word piece, and I am so afraid of going back to it and reading it just that second time. I've had it. I printed it all out, and I know, I know we've talked about the fact that when you feel it has to deserve being printed out on paper, and I was like, if I print it out on paper, I'm going to put it on my coffee table, and that's like, look at this thing. Not only did I print it out on paper, but I found at work in an old cabinet, I found the reddest 3-ring binder I could find that fits all the pages. So it's been sitting on my coffee table, but I'm only halfway through it, and I printed it out in I think it was the beginning of December. So we're at the beginning of February, and I'm only halfway through it because I'm so afraid of going back, because I'm afraid of all of the work I'm going to find in there that I need to take care of.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have me, Tim.
Yeah.
I, having never done this before, I will now speak with absolute certainty and confidence, that I can coach you through this problem. I have never been, one to lack confidence, even when undeserved. But no, for real, I started making some notes, because that's kind of what we do. We pick a topic. This time around, it is strategies for your next revision. And then I kind of do some thought work, and then you bring the real world applicability to it, and we figure out, how to move forward. So I've got a top 3.
Yeah.
Not 5. We're trying to stay simple here. It's season 3. So we're going to start with 3. But yeah, I mean, so are you ready? I mean, I've got strategies for your next revision.
I've got your notes right here. I'm ready. I'm excited about this.
Good. I am too. And I'm excited to be in a position one day to have something that I can then apply this framework to. That'll be great. But for all of you folks out there who do have work that maybe scares you the same way that Tim expressed, where it's just like, gosh, am I really going to start climbing this mountain again and see all of the missteps and whatnot? I think, coming to this work with a really positive mindset, very, very important. And it's not perfect. And so if we come in and hold ourselves to a standard of perfection after one draft, we've made the work impossible. It can't be like that. So my thinking is that you start big. So you'll actually go in, read the whole thing, and make notes that are large in scope. Big notes. We're not talking about like editing sentences. We're not talking about, I need to fix this scene necessarily. What we want to do is kind of go in and look for big trends. And I've identified 4 big trends that I would be looking for and that I'm going to recommend Tim look for, which is character arcs, pacing, energy, and internal consistency. So let's go a little slower there. As far as the character arcs, I mean, you kind of know where you want your hero to begin and what their journey is. And then when you get to the end of the book, probably they've changed. I hope they've changed, right? Because that was the whole point. But where is this person now relative to where they were at the beginning of the book? Is that enough of a change? And only you can decide that. And is that change satisfying to you as the writer? That's the first big thing. So have you looked at Madeline? You haven't read the whole thing yet, though, have you?
No. And that is, it's the character is the first thing that I have started to sort of think about, because I have, when I wrote the whole thing, I sort of like was using kind of big, broad stereotypes for characters. And when I say big, broad stereotypes, I'm talking about all those 80s movies I watched. And of course, I'm talking a lot about noir films too, because this is a book that I'm writing because of my love of noir. But I really started to try and pick apart like who these people are. And that's been very, very helpful, because I'm like, wait a minute. If I figure character out first and what each of these people want, that's going to make, and it sounds so, look, I just super quick. One of the biggest hangups that I put myself in is that once I got that degree in writing, I thought I must be good. And so I kept on putting myself under this idea that I'm a writer now. I know I should know what I'm talking about. so that when I put out a first draft of something, it should be pretty close to being amazingly imperfect. Like I see all of the time people are like, hey, my first book is out, but I feel like I don't see a lot of the struggle from I'm going to write a book to it's here on the shelf at an independent bookstore in Portland, Oregon. Isn't this exciting? And so that for me took that away. Like I'm like, well, there shouldn't be work involved. I'm a writer. I should know what I'm doing. This is also called mid-20s hubris. That's why it's so difficult for me to go back to my first draft, because I'm like, I thought I should be good at this. No, you jackass. You haven't really worked on it in 20 plus years.
Right.
So give yourself space. So when it comes to things like saying, oh, if I figure out the character and what each character arc is and what each character wants, that's going to really help out like a solid percentage of this book. It sounds so basic. And it took me 30 plus years to learn that. So if you're out there and you're just sort of like thinking, man, is this going to be okay? Or how much work is involved? I guess it's as much work as you're willing to unravel in yourself before you unravel it in your book.
Yeah. And, when you talk to somebody in an elevator, you have that elevator pitch of, oh, what's your book about? That's really the level of discourse that we're talking about as far as character arcs. You should be able to express, oh, this down and out lawyer who's an ambulance chaser, catches a big case and, goes on this other, wild ride or whatever. I was actually thinking of that movie with Paul Newman. What's the name of that movie? The Verdict. That's it. I was thinking about The Verdict, which is an old movie. They used to make us watch it in screenwriting class. The professor that I had thought that it was a really clean screenplay. And so let me see if I can remember real quick. Paul Newman is I think he's kind of a drunk, but he's a down and out lawyer. He's an ambulance chaser, and he picks up this case, which is really a gift from a friend. It's one of these cases that you can just plea out and get a bunch of money off of it. And something about the case makes him think twice, and he sees that the person that he would have just sort of pled out is truly innocent, and he wants to defend it. And of course it risks everything in order for him to try this. And in the typical kind of 3-act structure, he goes way down into the trough, and it looks like there's no way in hell that it's going to work out, and it ends up working out. But, the character arc of really, where does this person start? Roughly speaking, what is their journey, and then how does it resolve itself? You could probably do that in 3 sentences, if you really had to.
Yeah.
So, that's where starting with those character arcs is just making sure, did what I set out to accomplish, did I actually get all of that on the page? And I think the answer is very often going to be no. And that's okay, because if you might change your mind halfway through, I think that happened to you, Tim, where you were going in one direction and you discovered through the act of writing, ooh, this other way might be even cooler. And instead of going back and rewriting certain sections, you just kind of took a left, and then you kept going in this new direction. Well, when you go back through the narrative, you're going to see the old map kind of laid out, and you're going to go, oh, that doesn't fit anymore. Well, that's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Like, it's not a big deal. Just go fix it. It's okay.
and that's what I told myself at the time when I was writing it. I had written myself into a corner where I was sort of very much like, I don't like how this is going. This doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. So I did that kind of like, what I did was I sort of just started fresh the next day with one of those sort of like, everyone's around the table looking at the map and how they're going to do the heist kind of scene that you would see in a movie. But I did it that's kind of like in my, in the world of the novel that I was writing. So I just sort of like, okay, here's where we're at. You have to do this. You have to do this. We have to figure this out. They have to do this in order for this to happen. And that really helped me clarify how I wanted to end, where I wanted to end it. So yeah, that was something that happened.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, that's something that'll leap out at you in that reading of the work, but that's something that would be hard to recognize. There would be so much noise getting in the way of that if you were also focused on sentence structure and is this the right word for this phrase? Like, please do yourself a favor and do not line edit. It's like, that is not worth your time. So the other big things that you're looking for, one that I thought of was, are there any lulls in the action that make it feel slow or plodding? And this is just a pacing issue. So when you're reading through it, does it take a long time to get from A to B or from B to C relative to what's around it? And that'll just jump out at you. That nobody needs to be clairvoyant to figure this out. You'll be reading, and if you ever kind of catch yourself going, geez, when's this going to end? You have found it. You have discovered the pacing problem.
Yeah.
The other one that you might come across is, you're writing something and all of a sudden it's like, look over there, a tree. And then you're on to something new and you're like, whoa, how did we get here so quickly? You have discovered it. That is a pacing problem. You're going to have them. It's not a big deal. Just make note of it. Don't even try to fix it. Just circle the area, make a quick high level note. Hey, got to slow this down. And you might even have an idea of how to do that. Feel free to make that note in the margin, but don't fix it.
Yeah.
Work through the whole thing before you start trying to fix anything.
Yeah, there's a great exercise that you can use as a performance game in narrative improv called Advance and Expand. And I feel like, again, that sort of improv background really helps in creating a story, for me at least. The Advance and Expand is sort of like when you catch a moment, when you hook onto a moment and you either realize this is a moment where I need to expand on the information. We went to the store and bought a piece of candy. Maybe that piece of candy you need to expand on the piece of candy. What's the name of the candy? Why do you need the piece of candy? Who needs it? So that's kind of a really interesting game that you can kind of play with, that I sometimes do, where it's like there's a detail that comes along and I say, you know what? I need to expand on why the person said this and sort of make a notation of that, or continue to advance, like just keep advancing the action. Yeah, that's really cool. Because when you were just kind of laying that out, I'm like, oh, what would my answers to that be? And I'm like, oh, clearly the candy is a piece of Bit-O-Honey. And then you're like, well, why? I'm like, well, yeah, because that was my mom's favorite candy. Oh, but my mom died. Oh my God. And now I'm going into this emotionality of I'm eating this candy because I miss my mom. There's all kinds of ways to do that, but it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Just the framework of here's a decision that you have to make. Your mind's going to make it for a reason. And then you just figure out why you made the decision. And that's really nice. I like that. Yeah. There's another one that's usually, gossiping. If you gossip, like if you have two improvisers that come onto a stage for a narrative improv scene, they can gossip. Hey, Bill. Hey, Tony. What's going on? Nothing much. Another day at work. Yeah, another day at work. Well, it's Tuesday. Yeah. Big meeting today. What? You just continue to gossip about the day, about the banalities of life, until something initiates an emotional response from someone else on stage with you. And so for me, especially at the beginning of writing this novel, there were scenes where I was just like, let's just have these two people talk and find out where it takes them so that I could find a plot point to hook onto. So again, if you can find it and it's not $500 a class, looking at you, Upright Citizens Brigade, please take those narrative improv classes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously they've given you some tools that help you advance the narrative. Yes. Probably more quickly than someone like myself who like to bleed everything out at once. It's funny though, because the energy of the piece and sort of how dialed in you are as a reader, that'll jump out at you as well. Because we already talked about character arcs and pacing. Those will jump out at you pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But what I like to think about is energy is when you're reading through, where the best stuff is, that vein of gold that you found. And then where it's kind of lagging or where it seems unfocused. Those are the things, again, don't try to fix them necessarily. Just make note of them. Like, wow, this seems out of place here. Or what's the point of this? Or how do I connect this to the other thing that's 100 pages away? Making sure that you find those places where the energy is highest. And essentially you'll just keep the good stuff and then you'll just punch up the things that need to be punched up. The last one is around internal consistency. And so what I mean by that is, are there sections that don't make sense anymore? So like we talked about where you might veer the narrative off because you have a better idea kind of midway and you don't want to go back and revise it. Well, that's still there. And it's almost like a landmine if you kind of leave it there. So don't ever have a blind spot on your narrative that, oh, well, chapters 1 through 3 are fine. I can just ignore those and just move forward. I guarantee you there's a landmine in there that if you read it fresh or if you gave it to a beta reader and had them read it fresh, they'd go, what's this thing about the princess? Like it's only here. Like, what is that? Like, oh no, I took the princess out. So that's kind of the four main things when you do that kind of start big. And that's just in reading it through and kind of making those initial notes.
Yeah. All I got to do is just read the book once over. That's all I got to do. But I start reading it and then the panic happens and then I make one note and then I make another note. And it's some of my old bad habits. You know, when I was plodding through those years where I wasn't really writing anything, I'd have a paragraph. I'd type it up into my, I don't know, Smith Corona word processor or whatever I was using. And then I would go back and fix and fix and fix and fix and fix that opening paragraph so much that I never made forward progress. So, I'm falling back into that habit where if I'm reading, like, I think I'm at page 112 of 214 or something like that. I sort of read it and I'm like, you know what? Wait a minute. It would be easier if I said this. And actually, what if I did this too? And so I got to get out of that. And I think you're very right. Just read it over, big notes, nothing specific. Just get through it and just, don't worry too much.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of it as a piece of cheese, your first draft is Swiss. It's going to have holes in it and they are going to be there, and that's okay. To set up that expectation that it would be a perfect movement, I think is unreasonable. And so I'm trying to tell myself this as well, Tim, just like, don't put that much pressure on yourself, Art.
Yeah.
Go make a bad, ugly draft so you can actually apply this, Art. That's kind of where I am. Well, look, once you've done all the big notes, and so that's really your next piece is to go back, read the whole thing, make your big notes, and don't put any pressure on yourself to make changes in that first pass. Just kind of write down what you think you might want to do. The next thing is when you've got your big notes, now you're going to very selectively pick the pockets where you're going to start actually revising, because some of that first draft is going to stay. You're not going to, I don't know, many writers may actually start from zero and just start writing the whole thing again. I find that terribly demoralizing. I don't want to do that because there's got to be something good in there. I can't have written all garbage. There's something good in there and I want to keep it. Right. Yeah. And look, it may not make it to the final draft, but why make it harder on myself to throw away good writing? Let me just keep it for now. So anyway, I like to go back and take a look at a few things. The first one is my narrative hook compelling enough to bring readers in? And I apply these things to short fiction because that's really all I've written is short fiction, but they all apply. So the narrative hook, of course, is how do I gain the reader's interest very quickly? Typically in movies, it's going to be some sort of action sequence. It doesn't have to be that, but that's kind of your standard fare is, you either introduce the murder mystery with the actual murder, or you have some car chase or whatever, but something is grabbing the reader's attention and making them go, wait, what's going on here? I want to know more. So you can look at your first draft and take a look at that opening scene. And I would recommend strongly that it's not a prologue, because a prologue's kind of you got to know this before we start. Right. And there's very strong emotions about whether prologue should even be a thing. But I'm really talking about the first scene, or the first sequence of your book. Is it compelling enough to grab the reader by the collar and go, you need to pay attention to this? So Tim, what's your narrative hook? Like, what is it that you have right now that's kind of pulling that reader in? What's happening early on?
Well, I think I feel pretty confident about my opening couple of scenes. The very, very first scene, what I did was just to write in 1,000-word chunks because I could fit that into my schedule. So what I was going for was trying to write small scenes, and then again, because I was thinking ahead, in the second draft or the third draft, if I ever got to them, I would be able to expand them and make them bigger, do what I needed to do to fix them. But it fit my time, it fit my schedule, I could do that. So I really felt like the first couple of scenes I feel very confident about because it's opening up the world. I love world building. I've said that a zillion times. I love the world building. It's just the nitty gritty of making that all work in a plot that tends to cut me off at the knees. But the way that I got into the novel, I found the first scene. That's happened a couple times. In one of the other 50,000 word pieces I wrote, it was the first sentence. And the first sentence was that spark. It just ignited. And I just went from that spot to writing the entire piece. It would take months, or it took a half a year, it took a year, whatever the case may be. I always love it when I find what I feel to be the very beginning sentence. Now, of course, that might not happen. That might not be there when subsequent drafts reveal what I need to do. But I feel confident because my first scene is about someone who's robbed. And so I'm just sort of setting up the background of this person by having them wake up in the morning. It starts on a Monday morning, and a couple of characters who are going to be integral to the plot. I don't know why I feel like I needed to say that. It's not like I was going to throw in someone that wasn't important.
A couple of characters who are completely inconsequential.
I just want to let you know, by the way, here's what's happening at the Burger King that has nothing to do with it. But I have a couple of the characters, and it's just them waking up Monday morning, ready to go to work. And this Monday morning is when, this robbery has been discovered and money is missing. And that's what starts this entire book. So,
well, that sounds good.
Yeah. And so I guess what I should say to tie that together is one of the things that I loved about writing in smaller chunks and moving forward with that is that I felt like I could give it a little bit of a cliffhanger each time I finished a section so that it would keep me interested. Oh, I know what I need to write next. Now I know what I need to write next. I mean, successful? Who knows if it's going to end up in the final draft of it. But for me, writing it, that's what kept me excited about it was, oh, what a great thing. Our first scene is this guy, he owns a chess shop. It's called the Chess King. It's in a mall. He's going through the routine of everything because, he's getting older. He's getting up there. Everything kind of, he's just kind of slowing down a bit. But he has his routines that keep him going. And he's go to work today and he's going to find that the safe is empty. And that's like, oh, wow. I had that happen in my head, wrote it down. I feel confident about that hook.
That sounds good.
It's just the landing. We'll see if we can stick that.
Well, I mean, there's all the other fun,
Yeah.
Blast off, and you still have a long way to get to the moon before you land. Yeah. But blast off is great.
One of the things that I really want to know, this is fascinating. I am continually mystified, impressed, amazed by your ability to just pull metaphors out to explain your ideas. Is this from the years of doing training that you have done? Do you have a small book in your pocket that you just whip out at a moment? You do it in such real time. I am so envious of your ability to explain ideas simply. I'm very jealous of you.
That's very kind. Thank you. You're the one who's actually writing a book, though. So let's temper our excitement. I don't know. Maybe I've been a learning and development professional for 24 years now. And I'm a very good facilitator. And I don't know. It's just something that I like to do. I like to think visually, and it helps me tell the story a little easier. Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
And what would happen here is if that was me saying that to you, you would say, yes. I mean, think about it like a house plant.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's more like the stinking corpse flower that only blooms once every so many years.
I love it.
The thing about the big notes that we were talking about and sort of beginning with that narrative hook, that's just one place you can go. My recommendation, again, having never done this, but really thinking about, well, how would I approach this? If I had to teach someone else how to do it, how would I approach it? It seems to make sense that you start with your narrative hook, make sure that is compelling because you haven't gotten the manuscript in a position where you can give it to a reader yet, probably. This is basically what we're assuming is that you've done your first pass and that now you've read your first pass and you've made a bunch of big notes, but you need to kind of go back in and fix it enough to where you can show it to someone else without being mortified. I think that's the goal. Because I've asked Tim several times to send me his first draft, and he said, oh yeah, no problem. And I still haven't seen that thing. And I'm like, I'm just going to stop asking. It's unfair of me to ask anyway. I'm kind of being a jerk asking for it. So instead, I'm just going to own that. And because my goal is always to help, but I get a little too eager. So the next step is to look at your big notes now that you've read it and go, all right, what plot holes need to be filled? What gaps are there? And that might come from, oh, well, the map of the story changed a little bit. And so now I really do need connective scenes here, here, here. It's going to jump out at you. It's going to be in your notes. So I would start by writing new stuff. To me, that's a good positive place to begin, because if you start by going in and kind of stripping it down to the studs and then trying to build it back up again, that can be a little demoralizing. And I can speak from experience on that. That's how I used to approach short story writing, is I would keep everything good. I'd strip away everything that was bad and I'd start rebuilding. And you're left with just fragments and snippets. It's like broken glass on the ground. It's like, this used to be a window. It was a shitty window, but, and I broke it and I kept the good parts of the window, but, I don't know if I can make this a window again. Like, I don't know if I can do that. So it's just like, damn, dude, like why don't you write something new? And I think from an emotional standpoint, because really to ignore the emotionality of being a writer and trying to create art, I think would be a problem if we just approach this as dispassionate, well, what you need to do is X, Y, Z, and of course it will be done. No, that's not how people function. So if I start filling those holes, I might get excited to then go back into the narrative and say, oh, well, I really like this new stuff that I wrote to fill these plot holes. If this other stuff doesn't work, well, let me fix it real quick and I'll try to smooth it all over. So ultimately, that's the goal. For your second draft, it's about making sure your narrative hook is strong, because you want to at least give that first good impression, that sugar on the tongue for your reader. And then what plot gaps need to be filled before I can actually show this to a reader? Go ahead and fill those in. And then the last thing is, what's still missing from the book? Is there anything that's still missing? But really that's what you're doing. You're just trying to kind of shape that up. So strip out the bad, keep the good, fill in the gaps, and then get it in front of somebody to get some real world feedback and see if if it holds up.
Yeah, that is something. I just did that for the first time yesterday. I started writing some new pieces to stick in there. I like the way that I've started it, and I love this idea of the new day and everybody's kind of falling into their roles in this mall where this crime takes place. But I've sort of been trying to think about more malls. Like, what happens in malls? What do malls have? You know what? Every mall has one of these weird places that it's a shop, but it's not a shop, where they just have a bunch of massage chairs out for people to use, I guess. So, I just I wrote a brand new section with a character that I really like, and I've been thinking about a lot of things. So yeah, that's been kind of fun and getting me more interested in it. One of the other things I think this sort of helps, I just started this past week, there's an app, that Freeform app. And the Freeform app has a bunch of shapes that you can make. So essentially, I'm sort of making a chart or index cards of the pieces of the novel, the sections and how I want them laid out and how I think it should go, with notes on clues that I'm leaving, unspoken things that I'm trying to do, all of that kind of ephemera, which has really brought me back into the world of the piece. Plus, on this same app, right next to those notes, I'm making a great big map of the mall so that I can stay consistent within the world of being like, oh, this store is in this wing of the mall. These stores are in that wing. What is the shop that's next to the candle shop that most of this action takes place in? The chess shop, where is that located? And so it's been really fun to kind of creating new stuff and sort of mixing it in with the old.
Yeah, it's really nice that you're doing it that way. That's a lot of work that's hidden, and it probably feels like low value work, but it just helps to keep the environment rich, and to make the narrative hold together. If you can reference, a familiar bench, for example, and have it be in the same place every time, then it's like it's the reader's bench now. Like the characters have swirled around. I know I've encountered stories where location is important and you have sets of characters who kind of cycle through a certain location. And like, this pair has come to this park and they don't know what happened to the other three people who we've already experienced in that park. And, it's almost like you have an inside track or a special understanding of it. And it can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's been very helpful. And one of the things that I'm having a lot of fun with is visiting the mall itself physically And I'm taking 4 of the malls that I grew up with in Rochester, New York, and I'm essentially making each wing of this mall one of those 4 malls. So
cool.
It's been very, very fun. Yeah, it's been fun. I've been talking to some of my childhood friends about it. Remember this place, or remember that place, and what they had. And I think Irondequoit Mall. Remember Irondequoit Mall? It was so big and so fancy and so new and so 90s, and now it's falling into a swamp, so no one's there anymore. That kind of stuff we talked about before with detail, and the detail is going to enrich the place. And so I feel like with this map that I've made, yes, you're right. I think I was reticent to get into it too early because it felt like low value work, because my impulse was finish the first draft, get this big giant piece of dookie out there. Season 3, Tim tries not to swear as much. And
art has no such limitations.
and get it out there, and it didn't seem like it had value to me. But now there's tremendous value in, if this character is in this spot at the mall, will they see this other person? What are the connections that can happen? Oh, you know what? What if I put a Radio Shack here, or some whatever I'm going to call it in the store? Oh, which reminds me, Art, I forgot. What is the name of the art shop in my mall? Art Supplies for Art. You had a better name for it.
Oh, it was Art Supplies Supply Store.
Art Supplies.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good.
So when you attack your rewrite, are you going to be doing the big notes here coming up soon? Because I think you said you've gotten about halfway through reading it.
Yes, I still haven't get to the point, like I mentioned, for simplicity's sake, that characters around the table and restating what the purposes are because of where the big change that I wanted to have. I haven't gotten to that point yet. So for right now, it's just, oh, here's a spot I can expand on. Oh, here's a place I can add another clue of. Because, with the noir movies, and what I'm really interested in is the sort of diversions, the sort of red herrings, throwing little things out, like what's an important note, what's not an important note, what's something that I can drop right here that doesn't seem important but might seem important later, what's super important but doesn't seem important. So right now, I'm sort of making some of those small notes because I haven't gotten to that scene where I took a left turn to make it the book that I wanted to make it. So I'll get there soon. I'm getting there soon. I've got a nice rest of my day today after we record today is going to be spent just doing a little bit of, house cleaning. And I might sit with that and try and bang out a big chunk of that and finish reading it.
I think that is commendable. And whenever you're ready, I would also like to read it. But again, let's make that the second draft, because that first draft is for you and the second draft is for some other reader.
Well, you know what? I got to be honest with you, Art. I just sent you a PDF of it.
Yes. Victory.
You're like, I keep asking Tim, and he's like, sure. And now, so I had to. So,
awesome. Well, thank you. I'll read it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I tell you what, if you could, just strike out whatever sentences don't work, or write about 50 pages that kind of fix any of it.
You don't want me writing your book, man.